Okay. Now, if
Yeah.
you were talking to a brand newbie right now,
Mhm.
how would you define content marketing? Like, what would you tell them that is?
For me, content marketing is really the use of digital assets to tell the story that needs to be told to help, drive awareness of a product or service and ultimately sales. Right. So when I talk about a digital asset, I mean that could be a blog, that could be social media, that could be an opt-in that you kind of create and someone downloads. That could be like there's all those different pieces of I'm going to say content. You can't use the definition, the word in the definition. But that those sort of assets that you create and deliver online that tell a story, that I think that's another piece of it. There's a communication aspect of it, and
Hmm.
they could be written or they could be audio. Like what we're creating right now is content, right? So it could be
Yeah.
an interview, right? But it's any of these digital assets that live online that do the job of telling the story that needs to be told to the community that you're wanting to invest in your products and services.
I had a feeling you'd nail it and you'd explain it,
Thank you.
you'd explain it in a way where it doesn't seem so difficult to get started in, you know.
Thanks. Yeah.
So I wanted to talk to you a lot about nurture marketing and like let's talk about what nurture marketing is because this
Yeah.
is your big thing and I think this is a difference maker and one of the biggest changes in marketing, especially just to implement for our own clients this year is this like shift away from some of these dark things you're talking about, which I feel like I sound like Dexter,
I
but yeah, nurture marketing is the answer. And I would love for you to give your spiel about this. I am so excited for my students to learn this from you and people who are newly diving into this area.
Yeah, yeah. So for sure. So actually, we'll take it back to the definition of content, right? We're creating all these digital assets. And when folks aren't super well versed in the marketing space, so I say that because I don't want to throw shade at anybody. It's like we do what we do until we learn something different and better, right? But we know that content helps us market online, right? So we're out here and we're creating all this content. But what we really need to do, if we want to see results, if we want it to be effective, we need to assign a purpose or an intention to the types of content that we create, which means that we are going to have some content that we might create that is designed to help us get new leads, right? We think of lead magnets, the little freebie that you opt in for. That might be something that would be considered lead generating content. And we have sales content, right? We have all the assets that might go together in a launch, sales pages and email sequences and that kind of thing, promotional posts and videos. Nurture is what is supposed to happen in the middle. So nurture content or nurture marketing, really, it bridges the gap between lead generation and sales. And it does the job of taking a new lead and drawing them along the buyer's journey so that when you present them with the opportunity to buy, they are ready. I want to distinguish because we often, like, again, I'm very big on intentional marketing, intentionality, right? You might have heard about nurture before. You might have thought before, okay, well, if I'm not, attracting a new lead or when someone joins my community, I want to, or my client's community, I want to, keep them engaged. And there's this mistake that happens that I see quite a bit where we sort of take the idea of nurture to mean, oh, I'm staying visible or I'm just putting out more content. Content to keep them engaged, content to keep them nurtured. But the differentiator for us at Orisha is that your nurture content, if you want to be creating content that earns its keep, if you want to create content that delivers an ROI, you want the content that they receive after they become a new lead, after they join your community or your mailing list. You want it to be very specific and do the job of presenting the messages that those ideal clients need to receive to help them kind of lean in and become ready to work with you. So instead of just kind of creating any content with the hope that like, but just put something out there, it's better than nothing. It certainly is better than nothing. So again, if you're putting something out there, it is better than nothing. A way that we can get a lot more efficient with our content creation and a lot more effective is if we view nurture marketing, we view our content creation with for that portion of the funnel, for that middle of the funnel, if we view it with the lens of what messages do those prospects need to receive so that they can become ready to buy, right? And create
Yeah.
content with that lens on.
Okay. And I love this.
Yeah.
Thinking about my own business, when I first threw up my website and started to promote myself, I never had before. I didn't really know. Like I kind of needed some time to figure out those, values and like what my voice was. And so now 3 years into my business, I'm like getting smart about it. And I see that, like I witness that. And I think sometimes these unicorn digital marketing assistants, we get the clients who have nothing, and you're just kind of
Mhm.
like going and you're building and you're figuring it out. And then we also get these clients who are more established, had success, and it's almost like content overwhelm because they have too
Yeah,
much. So being able to like place it and figure out, like you said, what do they need to hear is
exactly.
so helpful to like hear this.
Exactly. And from a team member perspective, and one of the reasons that I created the Nurture Matrix is that when I was creating content, there was always this place of feeling like I was on a treadmill, like always creating more stuff, right? Particularly in those really established clients' businesses, right?
Yeah.
They're used to creating a lot of content. There is a certain level of like just throwing spaghetti on the wall to see what sticks when you're sort of getting started. And what happens for a lot of business owners is that they don't ever get out of that phase. And so you, team member, come on, and you're with a client now who's like used to producing at this massive level, then they want you to produce at this massive level. And the truth is all of that content is not required. And so you're kind of like, yes, you want to feel useful and you want to have things to do. And if you're billed hourly, like, maybe it's lucrative for you, but it's also really exhausting, because
Yes.
usually when you're creating at that level, at that bandwidth, they're usually not super organized, right?
No.
So you're like waiting for them, you're waiting on a Friday night for that. And I'm speaking from personal experience, like waiting on a Friday night for them to tell you what the angle is going to be for the post that you need to create, to go out on the Monday morning or something like that. And you're like, like what does it need to be? And they're so used to creating kind of on the fly, like ad hoc, right? They're creating on the fly and you're kind of expected to kind of jump in and catch the ideas when they come through. And maybe you're contributing some ideas as well. But what I find usually in those businesses where they're real content machines, as much as you provide the ideas, they're still like, they want to be engaged in the process as well. And so there still is kind of that piece of like the waiting for them to say what's next. And I was getting burned out. I was getting real burnt out. I had been working in a business that had a very, intense sort of launch model. So they would launch like every other month or every couple months or something like that. And it was like one of the biggies, right? So, the different launches that folks can have. I'm talking a launch where like, thousands in the Facebook ads,
Yes.
email sequences with like 50 emails and like just all of the launch things, right? So I'd be in the mix of creating all of that. And then the launch would complete, we'd finally like think we're going to have a breath, but we really don't, because it's like, okay, well, now that we've done all the launch stuff, we need to hurry up and get some content out to the community that's not launch, that isn't salesy. Like we need to send them some value now. And then there was this, immediate pivot to like, oh, okay, got to hurry over here. And we would try to I would try to suggest things like, well, let's repurpose this and but again, if you don't really have that messaging dialed in, it's very difficult for you to help your clients help them feel that it's safe to repurpose that content, because they still are operating under the principle, like, I need something new and fresh and whatever. They've heard that already. You need them to be oriented on like, these are our core messages. We can safely go back to repeating those. And then you get to just like go into the archives, pull something that they feel good with and run with it, instead of having to engage in the whole, like, kerfuffle of like, tell me what the thing is. Let's create the new thing. That'll be, it just unhooks all of that drama. And that's really where the Nurture Matrix was sort of born, because I was really thinking about how can I, number one, like, let my client know that like, we don't need to be creating brand new all the time, but how can I really, because, this is a real ingrained sort of belief, especially for those, content creators, right? Like they believe like new, more, and they really pride themselves on it. So I knew that it wasn't going to be as simple as saying, oh, let's just, let's repurpose. We had tried that already. What I needed to be able to do with her is really impress upon her that if we get very clear about the messages that need to roll out and we make sure that our people are receiving those messages, our folks will be pre-sold in the community before the next launch. And guess what? Our next launch will be a lot lighter as well. So not only will we get to, sort of relax a little bit into the content creation from a nurture perspective, we'll also be seeing better results, from a sales perspective come launch time. And of course, the first time I did it, I didn't know. It was kind of like, this is my hypothesis. What do you think? Right? Like, let's see what happens. And, sure enough, that is exactly what we saw happen. We saw, folks joining waitlists, like, it all depended kind of what their particular business model looked like. But if they were folks who ran on a waitlist type of business, they were seeing folks step on the waitlist a lot earlier. If they did sales calls, they had more like folks step onto sales calls ready to buy kind of like quoting some of the marketing saying like, hey, when I saw you say X, Y, and Z, I just knew I had to reach out. They were seeing, sales earlier on in the launch period. So instead of not seeing a sale until like day 5, 6, 7 or whatever, and everybody being like tense as hell because
cart close day.
We're seeing enrollments like earlier on because again, they had received the pieces of the messaging that they needed to receive. And to sort of clarify, like the messaging that I'm talking about here, it's not like how-to content or anything else like that. It really is engaging the conversation that a prospect might be having with themselves as they think about their problem and think about the potential solutions and really get clear on what they've been doing incorrectly that's kept them from getting the results. So we're really looking at a specific type of content that we're creating as well. So what that does mean though is there is some new content that needs to be created because most coaches, particularly speaking to the coaching industry, but this could happen in other places as well. When you get when you're coming from the train of like, let's create brand new stuff all the time, we need to have 365 different ideas to post every single day and 52 blogs to put per week. There is a lot of content that is like, I don't want to say that it's bad content. It's just not effective at moving folks along the buyer's journey. Right. Yes. So there is a bit of like, a backbone and a foundation. That is what we, even with our more established clients who we brought through the nurture matrix process, we do help them create new emails, new content, new social. But we show them how to like marry it with what they've done already. So, so there's an opportunity there to kind of reuse some of what you've been using in a slightly different way. But it is a bit of a gap, right? It's a bit of a new way of looking at things for clients potentially. But I will tell you what, it will save you so much time, energy, attention. It saves them money and it's just more efficient. Like, especially if you're someone who would love, like if you're kind of in the assistant role and really wanting to think about maybe adding strategy into the mix or, spending your time on more high value tasks that maybe you can charge a little bit more for, right? Like this can be a way for you to show up as truly a unicorn in your business, like really, really super valuable to your clients because you're presenting sort of this, this new way of supporting them, right? With more direction than, doing things.
Love that idea of having a bank, being clear on your messaging, having a plan. And you're speaking my language here with all the clients over the years that I'm thinking about. And even my 7-figure client was a hot mess going into every single launch. And it shouldn't be like that. Yeah. And that ultimately it leads to that burnout, right? Really and when you're new, you can't just create new stuff all of the time. Like it's so much easier to go back and repurpose and reuse. So like being very structured about that. Like you're speaking my language as a journalism major and editor. Like I like to have a plan and know what we're talking about and not doing like a Hail Mary email at the 11th hour.